Ever since we've had Microsoft enter the video game console space, we've had a more intense console war between Microsoft and Sony, and yeah, okay, to some extent Nintendo too. But are the console wars about to change? Is it about to end? Since the introduction of the current gen of Xbox consoles, the Xbox Series S and Series S, Microsoft has been on the back foot to Sony's PlayStation 5. Recent sales figures have shown them lagging behind the sales of the PS5. GameRant reports that based on figures from a Take-Two Interactive's fiscal report, it is estimated that Xbox Series X and S, that's a bit of a mouthful, has sold 30 million units worldwide as of November 2024, while the PS5 sold 65 million. That's in total ever since these consoles were brought to market. But if we dissected these numbers more recently, even in their home turf, the US, Xbox has only managed to sell only 2.7 million units in 2024, while the PS5 enjoyed record sales during the holidays, making for a whopping 15.7 million units sold for the entire 2024. This is in the US. That shows how far Xbox has fallen away, more like fallen off a cliff. I would say that the poor quality of first-party titles did not help Xbox cause Redfall was such a slap in the face for gamers, and even Microsoft having been left red-faced. I do think it did take a toll on the console. That was not a good look for Xbox, as well as being positioned as the best entertainment platform. No, just no. But the main reason, the real villain in this story for Xbox is the enemy within Microsoft. Yes, Game Pass. Oh, how so wonderful you are with your glorious amount of games for the price of a cup of coffee, or an expensive cup of coffee, depending on where you come from. The Netflix of games and the possible killer of consoles. In this story, the Xbox console. Unlike PlayStation, Xbox games have not been timed console exclusive. What this means is that you get these Xbox games day one on Xbox and PC. So if you don't have an Xbox but you have a PC, yeah, they have a PC Game Pass for a couple of years now. You really don't need an Xbox to play these games, unless you want to play them in front of a TV, which you could technically do with a PC. Take a laptop and connect it to a HDMI cable and use an Xbox controller. Xbox Series X is now just a cheaper computer that you can't do your work on. Now don't get me wrong, I think PC Game Pass is the greatest thing Microsoft has ever done for PC gamers, like ever. Not counting some of the amazing classic games they've helped develop, their past efforts like Games for Windows Live, which was supposed to replicate the success they had with the Xbox Live service. It was a bit of a disaster for the company. I do think the impact of Game Pass as a whole on game sales is quite significant, and it has been reported that Xbox games in Game Pass lose up to 80% of their sales on the Xbox console. So the impact on Xbox games and the Xbox consoles have been hammered by this approach of doubling down with Game Pass on Xbox and PC. This approach, by the way, is what Microsoft, Team Xbox and Phil Spencer calls strategy. I'd say rather conveniently or coincidentally, them taking this new strategy comes in a year where Xbox has had its worst year in sales. Call me skeptical or rather cynical. I wonder why they are pivoting away from focusing on the Xbox consoles. But honestly though, I think it's a bit of Exhibit A and B, meaning Microsoft would have known that they were losing the console war with Sony for a while now, and they doubled down on their strength, which is where the Game Pass service, which beats PlayStation Plus by a mile, which later forced Sony to rethink PlayStation Plus to be a bit more competitive. But I still think PS Plus is quite pricey, perhaps depending on your regional pricing. It's hard to beat the value PC or Xbox Game Pass provides. And when people ask them what went wrong in 2024, they would just use that as an indication or an excuse of a change in strategy in a way to downplay the poor performance of the console's sale. I figure Microsoft would be singing a slightly different tune if Xbox sold way better. That's just a hunch. Microsoft isn't the only company that's changing its strategy. Sony, which for years, like any other console maker, has been banging on their console exclusive games. A PlayStation is the only thing that you'll need to play these games, at least for Sony's first party titles. But now we see a shift to a console timed exclusive, which means these games eventually make their way to the PC at often a better state as a definitive edition of the game that's more complete. While Sony has not had their games appear on Xbox, there is one that is often cited as the odd one out. Death Stranding, which was a PS5 exclusive, eventually arriving on the PC and then the Xbox, but also that's not a first party title, and Death Stranding was likely a timed PS5 exclusive, which meant it could be ported over to other platforms once the exclusivity ends. I've read a lot about rumors of PlayStation games being made available to other platforms, but I still doubt if Sony will release them on Xbox. Japanese companies are generally pretty conservative. And of course, Sony was a bit fearful that Microsoft could become the biggest gaming company with the acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Microsoft held the bargaining chips there over massive IPs like Call of Duty, which Sony did raise when it came to hearings about the monopolistic move of that acquisition. Microsoft, though, is pretty sensitive when it comes to court cases ever since being hit by that antitrust lawsuit they lost. Microsoft will do anything to make it seem like that no, we are not creating a monopoly here. No monopoly here, Waze Magic Jedi had. But also it made sense that Microsoft wasn't going to cut their sales of Call of Duty by half or even more, because Xbox doesn't have the massive user base that PlayStation does. So why handicap a blockbuster franchise like Call of Duty and also threaten Microsoft with court cases by denying PlayStation its Call of Duty? I haven't even got to Nintendo, which is playing their own game here. They're the most conservative of game companies that will continue banging on their classic IPs. Beloved by their fans for pushing great games, not the greedy wait. Oh yeah, that didn't go down too well, did it, Nintendo? But honestly guys, the console wars, especially between Xbox and PlayStation, are over as we know it. The console exclusives are a dying breed, but the console wars are still very much alive. Imagine if both Team Green and Team Blue release first party titles on each other's console. Why get a PS5 or PS6 over an Xbox? It would all come down to hardware differences, a race to technological dominance, and perhaps brand affinity. But the real winners, ladies and gentlemen, of the console war is us. Specifically PC gamers that has now gained so many great games. Steam has also been growing from strength to strength. We now actually got a legit new OS to run games on with SteamOS. Well, I know it's a Linux distro. Perhaps it will chip away at the dominance of Windows. We've got PlayStation games and better yet Xbox games day one. This is a great day to be a PC gamer regardless of who wins, who profits, who becomes the biggest game company, because competition always brings a better prospect to us consumers. I'll end this video with a very famous quote about wars. War never changes. Tell me in the comments, are you a subscriber of Game Pass or PS Plus? What do you think about these services? I have some issues with Game Pass, which maybe I'll talk about it in another video. By the way, if you stayed on to this point in this video, you are an absolute champ. I thank you so much for watching. Do hit subscribe as I aim to hit 1k subs. Let's go, people. Anyway, I did a video about a certain shooter that is entering a rather crowded field of co-op shooters, but is billed as a thinking man or woman's co-op shooter. FBC Firebreak by Remedy Entertainment. you can watch that video over here. Thanks for watching and farewell, noble friends.